So I'm not invested in this space. I'm invested in doing my own thing on the side, my freelance. I'm interested in that, or, whatever it is. The second situation, I have the compliance, but the compliance is just one small part of a larger culture where it's evident to me that my company is invested financially, but also invested emotionally in my growth and development, wanting me to learn more skills, to gain more knowledge, to have greater and more experiences to apply that knowledge, and then as a result, create or co-create new product ideas. When creativity comes from inspiration. I'm not inspired if that culture doesn't exist. If you come from that mindset that I talked about, where if your employees thrive, your business thrives. We talk a lot in L&D about ROI, but what is the ROI of L&D? It's something that comes up all the time. And even without having exact metrics to talk about it, it's just, I think, shifting into that mindset of if my employees feel safe and they feel that they can even ask questions. The most successful ecosystems have a node in every department. Where I have been able to have the most impact is when I'm able to tap into, let's say, for example, a VP of operations, and their overarching goal is for the entire company to operate better, obviously, right? And through building these types of ecosystems where it's very learner-centered, it's high motivation, low anxiety, the systems that we build are intuitive, we have governance around what types of courses we're producing, we have governance around user management, right? And what has happened is that, and this has always been sort of an unexpected benefit with those operations people that I've worked with, is the visibility that they gain across the company when all of those pieces come together, decreasing anxiety because I know exactly what to expect, and increasing motivation because I know exactly what I'm going to get at the end of this. Plain language in all of your content, even if you are designing a course for Stanford University professors. There's this concept that if you're not working 8-hour days and your back doesn't hurt and you're not stressed, then you're not working hard enough. And you don't deserve to have a life if you're not doing that to get it. All that whole mindset. And so I had to really sort of unpack and unprogram what was modeled for me in my life, and reframe, like my life can look different. It can look however I want it to look.
This is the Business Philosopher Within You podcast. I'm your host, Bhavesh Naik. A core theme of our podcast is building high-performing human organizations that stand the test of time. One way to do this is by actively supporting continuous learning in our teams, businesses, and organizations. To shed some light on creating sustainable learning environments that bring out the best in ourselves and our people, I've invited a very special guest to join us. Dr. Christie Vanorsdale is a learning systems architect who transforms complex organizational challenges into sustainable learning ecosystems. With over 15 years of experience spanning Asia, Europe, and the Americas, Christie brings a unique blend of learning sciences expertise and practical engineering mindset to learning infrastructure design. As a former ESL educator turned learning strategist, Christie specializes in building scalable frameworks that empower organizations to grow independently. She focuses on creating accessible, inclusive learning environments that drive measurable business impact while ensuring every trainer and learner feels supported. I am pleased to have you on this podcast, Christie.
Excited to be here. Thank you.
So, Christie, you spent basically your career setting up infrastructures for organizations and businesses and teams. And the question I had, and we always like to get to the basics on this podcast because we kind of get into the philosophical aspects of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is your definition of learning?
This is there's no easy way to answer this.
Okay.
But I will say the most straightforward answer is it depends on your philosophy of learning, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. So So if you think that it's a change in behavior, then
Yeah,
you likely align with some of the early behaviorist theories, that are
sure.
some of the oldest theories in education. Many of them, and it's not to say old isn't outdated. There's absolutely a place for behaviorism today.
Sure.
But some people define it more through a cognitive lens. And so,
Okay. Yeah,
are you able to remember the details?
sure.
Certainly that's learning, but that's
Yeah,
not the same kind of learning as are you able to apply what you've learned in a new context?
right.
That's a little
Yeah,
bit more complex.
sure.
So yeah, there's lots of
Yeah,
different ways to define it. It really depends on your goals.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And I love the behavioral change angle because, at the end of the day, organizations, businesses, they're results oriented, results focused. So they
Mm-hmm.
want to see results. And the results come from the change in behavior, right? So ultimately, whatever the impact is, it is that we want to create with learning. Something in our behavior, we need to behave or act differently than we did before for us to
Mm-hmm.
get different results. So, and I love that. There's a couple of ways that I've kind of looked at learning. One of them is collecting information and data and some updating our database. So putting things in our memory banks, right, that we didn't
Mm-hmm.
have before. And there's this definitely value for that, right? And there's another approach to learning, which is sort of, I like to call it insight based learning, which is, we're going through a day and we have an aha moment, right? The proverbial eureka moment, all right,
Mm-hmm.
where the thought drops in our mind, and our mind from that point on kind of changes. It cannot go back to the state that it was before. We've shifted, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's another definition of learning. So, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Um, a lot of thoughts actually. But
Uh
that's
huh.
probably just because, as my mom would say, I tend to overcomplicate things. But
Yeah.
that's just my nature, and that's why I chose to get into this field, and obviously, of course, to pursue a doctorate in it. Is that I overthink, and I think that's a good thing. We
And
need
you
more
love
overthinkers.
overthinking.
We need more overthinkers.
Yeah.
Um,
We do definitely agree,
yeah.
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
But from that learning scientist perspective, when you
Yeah.
say, "Oh, you're walking down the street and you have an aha moment,"
Yeah.
and that's a wonderful thing, and that of course affects perhaps the trajectory of the rest of our day, or maybe even the trajectory of the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
My learning scientist brain immediately goes, there's actually a lot of factors happening in that moment. So likely
Yeah.
you're having a low anxiety, which means
Oh,
you have a low affective filter, which is
sure.
a cognitive concept that refers to our working memory.
Uh huh.
The working memory is a limited space, limited time
Right.
processor, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when it is open and free, and because you're in a high motivation, low anxiety environment,
Sure.
um, you can process more information, right? And so you
Yeah.
can learn
Right.
better. But then there's also something else that happens called schema or schemata, which is our prior knowledge. And so
Okay.
this is our understanding of the world around us,
Sure.
just based on social cues, culture,
Mm-hmm.
language, right? Like I'm in an urban environment and I know it's winter, so I'm not expecting to see flowers, but there is a beautiful rose suddenly
Yeah.
blooming in front of me, right? And so my understanding of the world around me tells me that that's unexpected, and
Right.
that perhaps it's a sign that today's my lucky day, right? And
Sure.
so
Yeah.
yeah, so for you, it's sort of like, oh, it's an aha moment, but for me, it's like my brain immediately goes to all of
Ah.
these
Yes.
factors that are working to make that experience possible for us in our brains, of
Got it.
course.
And on that note, setting up structures to help others have experiences, learning experiences is so learning ourselves is one thing and helping others do it is another
Hmm.
thing. And that's your specialty, right? Learning
Hmm.
others how to learn, or no, helping others. I don't know if I've been saying learning, helping others how to learn, right?
Hmm.
So by setting up infrastructures and setting up the environments, or learning environments, and everything that it entails.
Hmm.
So the question I have for you is what is, if there's one, two things that you kind of keep in mind when you work with organizations, in helping them set up the learning experiences, the learning environments, what would that be? It's in the sense of making learning effective for the people who would be in that environment.
Mm-hmm. So there's sort of a two-pronged approach that I think is absolutely essential.
Sure.
And one of those is start with a target in mind. That's sort of very organizational, very business minded.
Sure.
What is your goal? What is your target?
Yeah.
And work backwards from there.
Sure.
And that concept is actually is also comes from education. It's called backwards design. It's the idea that we know we want to get our learners to achieve these 4 goals by the end of this semester, by the end of this hour, whatever it is. And then we work backwards from there to select materials and design assessments that specifically target that goal. So there's that. That's the very methodical, straightforward piece. But then there's the other piece, which actually aligns with the example you gave earlier, that aha moment, which is that no matter how well designed, according to those goals, like I just mentioned, your content is, if you don't have the right environment, right? If you don't have low anxiety, high motivation, environment that is accessible, and when I mean, accessibility is very, very important, but I'm talking more about access, right? When I enter your learning environment, is it intuitive to me what I'm supposed to do, or do I immediately get frustrated and shut down? Because there goes my motivation, my anxiety increases, right? And now I no longer have an ideal environment in my body, psychologically, cognitively, and physiologically, to be able to receive any of the training that you have spent so much time creating for me.
I love the way you're framing that, because you're saying that the environment, I think what you're implying is that the environment is not just the theatrical aspects of what's around us, as in, there's a chalkboard, or whether there's a Promethean board or something like that. There's desks and pen, paper, and in this posters on the wall, motivation, whatever. So there's a physical aspect of that environment. But I think what you kind of alluded to just now is the internal environment, as in me, the learner. I'm walking into that. What is my psychological state? And is that allowing learning? Is that allowing me to kind of be open, if that's a word, to letting things in? Safe, I think you used the word, right? Do I feel safe to drop my guard, the intellectual, psychological? Because learning is sort of like a vulnerable experience, right?
It's one of our most vulnerable experiences.
Right. Yeah. So, you have educational background in psychology. So, and I love that. You said that it's not just basically the first aspect of it, right? But the second aspect, which is, the facilitating the aha moment, if you will, right? What are some of the factors that go into that? How would you design an environment that not just give you that, targeted approach with results and behavior change and all that, but also brings this aspect into the learning environment?
So you can, one of the most important things, and from this I borrow a lot of concepts from design thinking, is really a lot of testing, a lot of prototyping, really, understanding your users, or your learners in this case. What motivates them? What, how tech savvy are they? What is driving the need for them to reach out for this training, right? So really taking, design thinking teaches us to start with a persona, design for a persona, go out and interview that persona, collect data to make sure that we fully understand what type of product is most intuitive to them, and what type of product they would find useful. Right? Because design thinking, for those who aren't familiar with it, is really all about, removing the ego from the engineer and from the designer, the designer, right? It's like, okay, I want to build this really cool house to show off how great and how smart I am, right? And then
Yeah.
nobody buys it because it doesn't make sense to anybody else but that
Yeah.
architect or that engineer, right?
Right. Yeah.
So taking that approach in a very similar way to designing learning environments, right? I'm not designing
Right.
this for me, designing
Yeah.
this for you. So let
Right.
me get down to the brass tacks of what type of environment you will thrive in.
Yeah.
And that can look different for every organization. That can look different for every type of training, right?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
There's
Yeah.
sort of among the L&D community, there's
Yeah.
this joke that kind of goes around all the social networks, and even when we're at conferences and we're talking amongst ourselves, it's that not everything needs to be a training,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
But
Yeah.
further, not everything needs to be an e-learning, right? So
Right.
I've had lots
Yeah.
of conversations with leadership, or managers who say, my employees, they're just not getting it. They keep making this mistake when they access this
Mm-hmm.
tool.
Yeah.
The only way to fix it is with a training. I want you to create a robust, amazing e-learning with all the characters, and I want there to be games, and I want there to be
Yeah.
animation and colors, and I
Uh-huh.
want them to click. And this
Right.
is surely going to solve this problem. Not necessarily, right? If we go out
Mm-hmm.
and we interview, spend a little bit of time on the floor
Yeah.
with those folks who are
Right.
making that mistake. And it
Yeah.
turns out that it's just that the system that they're making the mistake on isn't very user-friendly. And they really just needed either a change to the interface, because the interface
Right.
wasn't intuitive. They couldn't always
Yeah.
tell what they were supposed to do. Or
Right.
B, just a simple job aid, just a
Uh-huh.
one-page PDF with screenshots and
Yeah.
annotations that walks them through the process step by step, right? And
Right.
so again, design thinking is about trying to meet the learners where they are and designing
Yeah.
training products and training environments that are going to
Yeah.
help them thrive,
Sure.
right? Not
Sure.
just creating e-learnings for the sake of creating them.
Yeah. Yeah. That is so important. And this actually goes also to the heart of just a business, as in when the business loses the focus on the customer, as in this is not about us,
Mm-hmm.
all of us in the business, like if we have 50 people company, and we can make it about us, but there could be a culture of always keeping in mind this person or this organization or this persona, as you said, of the customer, right? Because everything is for that customer, and design thinking can actually also fit into just organizational design in a way, right? And that is such an awesome concept. If we can go back a little bit, who is the, and I think you work with entities, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there is a personal learner, but then there is an organization that brings or implements learning within their organization. So who is the best person or best title in an organization or best entity that can benefit from learning? Now, I know that this standard answer is anybody can learn, everybody can learn, but who, which organizations do you think, if you can cite a couple of examples of the kinds of organizations that can implement learning effectively in their organizations?
I don't know that there's, because of course I'm going to say all of them. Everybody can benefit from
you
this.
Cannot, yeah, because and by the way, it's true, right? The statement is true that we're all human, and we can all learn, and none of us is perfect, right? So that's kind of a trick question in a way, but I'm kind of trying to figure out if we can narrow down the focus of a kind of organization where this can be, the learning environments can be implemented effectively.
So while I won't call out a single organization type, because, like we said, everybody can benefit from this learning, and through design thinking and these design thinking principles, like I said, it's all about, I hate to use the word bespoke, but it does end up becoming that way. And that is something that I specialize in and something that I believe in. That I don't approach any new client or new contract with a one-size-fits-all approach. I have tools and frameworks that are founded in learning science that I lean on. But at the end of the day, we're designing a product for your employees, and it's based on the data that we've gathered around them, right?
Sure.
But
Sure.
from a leadership standpoint at the organizational level, right? I have found, I mean, in terms of who benefits from it most as a leader in my company, I would think somebody who's like the VP of operations, right?
Yeah.
Which is
Sure. Sure.
it's not what you tend to think, right? A lot of people tend to think that I work a lot with HR or I work a lot, with managers directly,
Sure. Yeah.
with people who are directly involved in training. But
Right.
where I have been able to have the most impact is when I'm able to tap into, let's say, for example, a VP of operations, and their overarching goal is for the entire company to operate better, obviously, right?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And through building these types of ecosystems, like we've talked about, right, where it's very learner centered, it's high motivation, low anxiety. The systems that we build are intuitive. We have governance around what types of courses we're producing. We have governance around user management, right?
Right.
And what has happened is that, and this has always been sort of an unexpected benefit with those operations people that I've worked with, is the visibility that they gain across the company when all of those pieces come together, right? Because, like I've worked with folks before who didn't really, they had a high level overview of how training was conducted at their organization or how we were delivering products to clients, right? But they didn't actually know at a granular level because there weren't any checks and balances in place. Typically, training happens in a silo, right? There's a certain group that does it. And as long as there aren't any major issues, nobody really asks questions, right?
Right.
But then you end up having a lot of, training is coming out in different formats because people aren't collaborating, right? Because it is siloed. And when you implement these structures and systems in place, like I talk about, because we have to do that in order to get that high motivation, low anxiety environment, you have to suddenly sort of have these checkpoints in place, like almost kind of like a factory line, right?
Yeah, sure.
And so now all of a sudden, each member of that line, they have to communicate with each other. There's a form that has to be filled out. Now the course has to be evaluated by a stakeholder before it goes live. Right. We're training the facilitators to make sure that they're hitting certain points because it aligns with our overarching vision of the system, right?
Right.
And it's through that process that somebody who's at the seat of from an operations perspective, everything I've just talked about was an operation. An operation intended to make employees stay longer because they have high motivation, their needs are being met. They feel that they're growing and developing with the company and no longer it's not just a paycheck, right? Customers are happier because they know how to use your product and they can access your training programs and they don't get lost in your LMS. Right. So from an operations standpoint, having all of those things connected is very, very beneficial, obviously, for those folks. So that would be my short answer to your question.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think what you're saying is, what you're implying, or maybe you're saying it, is that the higher that you go into the hierarchy and to have these kinds of learning systems and structures implemented in the organization, the more effective the program is. Simply because you would have a higher level perspective. You can, those silos. For example, if I go into just a sales organization and train salespeople, then they might not be talking to the marketing departments or their customer development or customer service or development or operations people. And you can make the same argument in any of those individual organizations. But if I can go to, let's say, for example, CEO or the CFO or one of the CXOs or the executive VP level, someone who is in charge of all the operations, right? Under whose umbrella would be all, the departments that need to be in that training program, then that training program would be more effective.
Exactly.
Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the ecosystem is the most successful ecosystems have a node in every department, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because and then once everything, and I talk about this a lot with folks, is like, what we're doing is we're developing your brand of training, right?
Yeah.
And so if you take a very
100%. Yeah.
if you take a very branding approach, everyone, the more people that are involved, the better, right?
Yeah.
And
Sure.
everybody's communicating. So just a really small example I can give you is, on a recent project, I implemented a process where before a training, we have a training in a scripted or sort of storyboard format, right? So it's written out on a piece of on a Word doc, not on a piece of paper. But before it moves to production, because once it gets into production, it's expensive and it's difficult to make changes. So while it's in that storyboard format, we send it out to 4 stakeholders: someone in marketing, someone in finance, even I think the CEO had a look at it, and they were all able to give feedback on the same document. So I set up a table. Each person had their own slot, and they gave feedback, right? And that was the first time that those high-level stakeholders had ever really collaborated on something like that. And I purposely had them all put their feedback on the same document because I wanted that transparency right across the board, so that everybody's able to see the mastermind of how this thing is evolving. It also brought up discussion, right? Because one person left a comment that made another stakeholder go, well, I didn't even realize we were doing this.
Right.
This is news to me, right? And and so that's just one example of how implementing these types of programs from that systems and structures perspective, it brings departments together. And then as a whole, we are developing our company-wide brand of learning and development, which is collaborative. Which aligns with my philosophy of learning, which is I believe that we learn when we co-create knowledge as a community. So I tend to follow that methodology when I design trainings.
Yeah, that's important. So if we can repeat that, we learn better when we learn when we co-create.
Yes.
So is that what you said? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, co-create knowledge.
So and I see that as sort of bringing perspectives together. The more I don't know if you noticed that. I don't know if you noticed this in your career. You worked in different countries and different cultures with different cultures, right?
Mm-hmm.
People who have who can speak 2 languages, they are, and I'm not going to take anything away from those who only speak 1 language, but they seem to be sharper in some sense, in the sense that everything that you put to them, they'll be able to translate in other languages. And languages are different, and because of that, you have to think a little bit more to be able to, let's say, if I'm speaking French, and I'm trying to explain to them in French to a French person something that someone said in English. I have to work harder, and the words may not be the same, and I have to look for the right word. So because of when the perspectives collide in an open, trusted environment, I think you said high motivation, low risk. Is that what you said? Right?
Low anxiety, low risk. Yeah.
Low anxiety, low risk. When we come together and exchange ideas and our perspectives, the learning happens automatically from that. We don't even know that we're learning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So the silos are similar, in a way that we have our perspectives. Salespeople have their blinders on as to what their priorities and what they need to get done, quota and all that. And marketing and operations and customer service and, finance. But when they begin to come together and collaborate and communicate with each other, starting with their particular heads of each department as you start, with working with them, learning can happen automatically just through the communication and conversation. Is that
absolutely
what you're alluding to?
Yeah. And so it's very much for me, I'm always trying to facilitate learning. So, so it's like, okay, I was hired to facilitate learning very specifically, let's say for your customers, but the learning starts day one when I walk through the door and I
Yeah.
get everybody in a room and I say,
Right.
what are your pain points? What
Yeah.
what has worked? And
Right.
what are your goals, right? Where would you
Exactly.
like to
Yeah.
see this program at the end of the year? And everybody gets a chance to give their input. And,
Right.
everybody, you give feedback and then
Yeah.
somebody comments on that feedback and then a new discussion starts. And that's learning, of course. I mean,
Yeah.
even just learning what one department has been doing
Right.
previously that you weren't aware of. And for somebody in a high level C-suite position, I mean, there comes a point where it's a lot of administrative work, right? And it's very filtered
Sure.
down. Like by the
Yeah.
time it lands on your desk, it's been translated through somebody else's perspective or somebody else's
Right.
lens. But
Yeah.
through the training programs that I help companies develop, everybody has a seat at the table.
Right.
I'm doing a lot of interviewing because, again, I follow design thinking. I'm doing a ton of pilots with
Right.
feedback because we're doing a lot of prototyping and testing because we're trying to create, again, something that's
Sure.
very user-focused, very
Yeah.
learner-centered. And so that requires all hands on deck.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to
Yeah.
join for a meeting on Friday, and we're going to test this ILT, this instructor-led teaching feature in the LMS.
Mm-hmm.
And then it also requires everybody coming together to learn a new way of thinking, a new way of doing.
Right.
Because previously, usually before I get there, if there is training happening, it's like I mentioned in silos. So you have individual trainers who are creating content and then they save it on their desktop, right?
Mhm.
But then when I arrive, my goal is to because I'm all, we want everything to be functioning in a shared ecosystem. So
Right.
now we're going to use a shared content repository where
Right.
everyone has to put their training materials in there, right? And so now we have immediate visibility across the company of
Yeah.
what types of training materials we've been using, what type, how people have been using those, what types of questions they've been asking, what types of assessments they've been doing. Where
Right.
previously, I know now, I have a client that even says, she doesn't have time to attend all the pilots and all the interviews, but she
Right.
knows now that if she's curious, she can just go into that shared content space and have a peek at what we're doing. And that's
Mhm.
so exciting for her. She previously didn't have that opportunity.
Yeah. Sure. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So basically going back to this idea of silos and collaborative learning, and along with that, you said something like branded learning. I don't know if that's the exact phrase you used, but you've used the word brand.
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate on that? What do you mean by that phrase? By bringing this idea of a brand into setting up learning environments?
Mm. I actually really love this concept because
Yeah.
it again is very very tied to design thinking. I wonder if
Yeah.
there's going to be a game to see how many times I've said that. And I didn't even
Design
realize
thinking.
I
Yeah.
was that passionate about design thinking, but this conversation is making me realize I am.
Yeah.
So an example of that is you have a learning management system,
Right.
right? And these are SaaS products.
Yeah.
They're just a big chunk of technology,
Sure.
and they're oftentimes very inflexible in terms
Right.
of how to use them. And
Yeah.
so if you're thinking about your brand of training,
Yeah.
what I do when I first come in and I start working with a company is
Sure.
I find out what all of their potential use cases are. Right. So again, and that's probably persona is another way to describe that. So who's
Yeah.
going to use this training, why, when, and how?
Right.
And then we spend some time modifying and adapting our training programs. And a lot of
Right.
times that includes the learning management system
Sure.
to meet all of our use cases. So
Yeah.
one example is that, I have a company, one client that is FDA regulated. And so when folks join the training online, they have to get an e-signature at the end of it because
Sure.
that's a very important compliance regulation with the FDA.
Yeah.
But and we found a system that does that. It has the
Right.
e-signature integrated, and we were like, great, yes, this is such a
Mhm.
great idea. But what we didn't know until after we purchased and we started diving deeper is that their use case is very special. And so this is where we get into that branded approach. Their use case is that many times they might have 30 folks attending a training,
Yeah.
but they're not attending on their own device. they may be attending
Right.
on a colleague's device. So they're all sort of,
Yeah.
let's say, in a conference room, and one
Yeah.
person is displaying the Teams meeting on a large screen, and so
Sure.
everybody's participating in that way.
Yeah.
But the system won't give them an e-signature if they didn't log in using their own device, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
it's
Yeah.
just a limitation of the learning management system. There's nothing we
Sure.
could do about it. And so
Yeah.
what we had to do was create different workarounds and test
Yeah.
them and test them
Yeah.
and test them. And it was like our 10th iteration, our 10th prototype
Yeah.
of a workflow that we were able to come up with that will
Yeah.
allow the client to do what they've always been doing, which is
Yeah.
have multiple people watching in one room, but folks can now log in and get their e-signature another way, right?
Right.
So they
Right.
don't have to go and watch the whole recording again,
That's
which is
true.
what the learning management company was suggesting. And we were like,
Yeah.
we can't
Yeah.
make people do that.
Yeah. Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
I have a ton of examples of just those ways that we really think about what are your use cases for your
Exactly.
brand, and let's
Yeah.
build a system that matches that.
And that's quite an undertaking. Learning management systems are pretty complex animals, and each one of them, whether it's WordPress based, LearnDash or something like that. There are so many other systems even within the LearnDash ecosystems, and then you have Moodle, I think, and there's so many of them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's and my frustration has been with the learning management systems is that it takes a lot of work, and I haven't found a single one that checks all the boxes. All right, so it is difficult, and the bigger, larger the organization, the more complex the requirements, and more specific the requirements, the harder it's gonna be to find the exact right system.
Mm-hmm.
So you're gonna have to do some kind of a not necessarily development, but tweaking, as you mentioned, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that example, you had to kind of find a workaround. And there are so many ways, and this is unbelievable kind of complexity. So my question for you is, Christie, how do you, simplicity and complexity, right? How do you, let's pretend you're talking to an executive vice president who has 6 departments, 6 heads of the silos reporting to that person.
Mm-hmm.
What is the process where you kind of help them figure out what their brand is?
Mm-hmm.
What is their value system is? What is the cultural aspects of how they kind of operate? We all have that, right? Every group of people has their own personality, the ways of doing things. And I think
Mm-hmm.
we can call them culture, and then we can ultimately call it brand or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the kind of conversation we have with this person to kind of, simplify it at the top level before you bring in any of these other systems, because it can just go out of control, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the most straightforward way that I have found, and I think the most effective way, is to spend some time. So there's a concept in instructional design where we call interviewing a subject matter expert.
Yeah, sure.
And the idea is that you're trying to extract data from their brain to understand this topic that they themselves are a super expert on, and then take that information and reformat it into some sort of an asset that a novice learner is going to be able to comprehend and take something meaningful away from, which is not easy to do. Instructional designers have a very hard job. But I was an instructional designer for many years, so I take that. I'm also a qualitative researcher. I love doing qualitative research. I love conducting interviews and looking through the transcripts and then categorizing the keywords and the themes that come up through those transcripts, and then making conclusions based on that about about the subjects.
Right.
But I have that mindset, and I take that mindset into every new client that I work with, right?
Sure.
And it's interviewing, so they are a subject matter expert, right? In their business
100%.
and in their sphere. And so in order to understand their values, their goals, and what drives them is to take that same approach, right? As an instructional designer, I'm trying to learn what they know. And
Right.
then I take that information and
Yeah.
then I can put it into a project plan. Or a lot of times I just like to use a Miro board. A Miro board is just a
Yeah.
visual tool where, you can use shapes and colors and you can draw, but it's a digital tool that you can share just to sort
Sure.
of show them, okay,
Yeah.
so if this is your goal, right, this is where
Yeah.
you want to be.
Right.
If
Yeah.
we go with this system, here's a direct pathway to that goal.
Right.
And then here is a not so direct pathway to this goal.
Yeah.
And, based on, because I've now interviewed you, I've interviewed someone from your finance team, I've interviewed someone from your customer experience team. I've
Yeah.
even gone out and I've talked to a few of your learners on the ground, right?
Yeah.
And so I have all of this data that I can put together and I can say, here are some potential pitfalls that I'm expecting that this system is not going to be able to provide.
Yeah.
Here are my suggested workarounds,
Right.
right? And so I guess the short answer to your question is I'm just always thinking about data first, making
Okay.
choices based on
Yeah.
data, based on choices about what's really in front of us, what we have. So no
Sure.
hypotheticals, no
Yeah.
dreams or,
Yeah.
what I want, but it's okay, what's available to us.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that I use that strategy many times before
Mm-hmm.
even contacting a learning management vendor
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
behalf of my client. I go to the
Right.
vendor and I
Yeah.
say, hey, listen, I've already done all this heavy lifting for you. I've already interviewed all the folks. I've collected all the
Right.
data. I know exactly what this company needs.
Right.
Can you provide this for us?
Yeah.
I need to see
Yeah.
it in a demo format, right?
Sure. Sure.
And then sometimes they say no, and sometimes they say
Yeah.
yes, right?
Yeah.
But it's so much more direct and efficient than the traditional approach with a sales vendor at a learning management company, because typically
Right.
you reach out, you say, I'm interested in your LMS, and then they throw back at you this
Mm-hmm.
boilerplate, yes, and we have all of these things, and it's the greatest system that's ever existed, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
my first email to those folks is very specific. Here are my use cases. Here are
Yeah.
our goals. Can you provide a demo that shows me
Exactly.
these 4
Exactly.
things?
Yeah.
And if you
Yeah.
can, then we'll schedule a meeting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why the role that you play is so extraordinarily important, because, I don't care if you're Walmart. Oh, actually, you're going to have a bigger problem if you're Walmart because, you have more people.
Mm-hmm.
But, and there's more complexity in their organization. But no matter who you are as an organization, you're going to have complexity in the way that you manage your business. And there's certain uniqueness about the way you approach learning, the way you go about doing your business.
Mm-hmm.
And the solutions out there don't necessarily fit hand in glove
No.
to your unique thing. And that's why it's so important to have this bespoke, I think you used the word, custom kind of an environment developed. Otherwise, you're going to have a mismatch. So if a vendor just approaches you, right, they're wonderful vendors. I have nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I have no problems with, vendors doing what they need to do to grow their business. But at the same time, if you just talk to one vendor, they're going to speak from their perspective, right? And the solution that they bring to you as an organization may or may not work for you. And chances are higher that it won't work, out of the box for you. So that's a tremendous role that you play in kind of trying to, bring some of this complexity into a more simple way of approaching, this endeavor of learning your people, teaching your people, and training your people.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk to, let's say, this person, this executive, who is thinking about this, that this person is he or she or they're thinking about bringing someone in, and they're thinking, okay, my learning system is not working the way it's supposed to be working, or there's something missing, or it could be better, or something like that. So there's some kind of vague idea of this, that something isn't right. Pain points, you said.
Mm-hmm.
And they somehow, they bring you in, you having a conversation. What are some of the things? So when you probably ask in some way, shape, or form, why are we even doing this? Why teach your people or train your people? And I'm always curious to hear, what are some of the answers you get? These folks, why to them is learning important, right? Because for the learning, for you and me too, in that space. We love learning and teaching and, change and organizational change management. But that's our thing, right? The people who are running the business, they're just running the business. They need the results and they need to satisfy the customer and grow their sales and, grow their margins and all of their things. Learning is sort of a way to, for us, it's the thing. Everything is learning for us. For them, it's a means to the end, right? So what do they say when you say something like, why implement learning system in your organization? Some of the things that you heard.
Well, I've heard all kinds of reasons.
Right.
No, I think I would say the most common is, like you mentioned, it's a means to an end. And for many organizations, it's about compliance. I mean, we have regulations in our country at the federal level and at the state level that, require folks, if you're employed with a company, to take one course every year. And so that's probably the most common reason why folks have those. Compliance.
We have to.
You have to. Yeah. And I think that's fine. You don't need to go above and beyond that. I mean, that may not necessarily be a company that's going to benefit from my services. Right. And it took me some time to figure that out as well. When I was getting started, on my own, I had to really, for the first year, I just said yes to every contract. I did, you just need compliance. I got you. Right. But then I had to give myself permission, and it took a lot of work to get there to say, I don't have to say yes to everyone. I can say yes to the types of clients and contracts that are really fulfilling in terms of my philosophy and beliefs. And we talked about that, and they very much center around, bottom line is I want to live in a world where all leaders of any group take responsibility of the growth of the people that they lead.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
And that is, in a nutshell, what I hope to deliver to people that I work with. But to the earlier point, not everybody's necessarily there or ready or even needs that. I have had folks who want an ecosystem that does that, but they are afraid to call it learning and training because there seems to be stigma around it, right? They just wanted they want to call it a community, right? And it's like, it's a community with learning goals, and and we invite speakers, and they come and they share their knowledge with the hopes that the attendees gain behavior change or from that. But we can't call it learning, because if we do, then people won't come.
We call it lunch and something. Lunch. We used to call it lunch and learn, but then there's learn word there in there. Right?
Yes, or even just community. A community of practice. Is one way that I've heard of trying to euphemize that. But I guess there's lots of different reasons out there. But I think for me personally, I'm luckily in a position now where I only have to take the types of roles that are interested in that latter. They're interested in really taking responsibility for the growth of the people that they lead.
Absolutely right. And the compliance thing, my take on that is I'm curious what you have to say about that compliance. So if someone says, well, I have to train my people and it's compliance, my tendency is to come back and say, okay, fine. It's compliance and you have to comply. But it's a terrible word, comply. I have to do this, right? Because the motivation isn't there. If we bring that learning terminology in it, the motivation isn't there. The aha moment isn't there, right?
Exactly.
It's, oh my God, I have to do this and I don't want to do it. And I had to, get dragged into it. So then the conversation could be about, okay, you have to do it. But now that you have to do it, how can you turn this into an opportunity for yourself in your career? If you're running a business, your business grows, your career expands, and you do well, and also your people do well. So how can this be an opportunity to do that? So we kind of go from need to a want, and I want to do this, right? Do you have any takes on that? Any strategies on doing something like that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you have to, I mean, there's no way to not do the compliance training, right?
Right.
Um, and
Yeah.
so we can say the compliance isn't going to go away. That has to stay.
Right.
But
Yeah.
if you can establish and then grow and build a culture around learning at your organization.
Sure.
So, right, because if you think about it, if you just have the siloed, right, it's just the compliance training. If you think about the affect of that on your employees, it's like my company only cares about my growth when it comes to a CYA perspective and regarding an audit, right? That's it. That's all they care. So I'm not invested in this space. I'm invested in doing my own thing on the side, my freelance. I'm interested in that, or, whatever it is. But in the second situation, I have the compliance, but the compliance is just one small part of a larger culture where it's evident to me that my company is invested financially, but also invested emotionally in my growth and development, wanting me to learn more skills, to gain more knowledge, to have greater and more experiences to apply that knowledge, and then as a result, create or co-create, new product ideas. When creativity comes from inspiration. I'm not inspired if that culture doesn't exist, right? And so if you think about the B scenario that I gave you, that person is not going to mind doing those compliance courses, right?
Sure.
It's not even gonna. It's not even gonna they're not even gonna think twice about it.
Yeah. It's just part of what I need to do, right? To attain the higher goal that I've set for myself, or the inspiration that I had that I need to fulfill, right?
Right.
Just part of that, and you will just breeze through it, and you'll do it. Yeah. Good.
Yeah, it's not as annoying. I won't say the annoyance goes away completely, but it's not as annoying as it is.
I love it. The whole reframing is genius. You taught ESL. Now ESL, and I think you also, correct me if I'm wrong, you also spent some time in the classroom with
So
school
I was an
system,
ESL instructor, like a direct ESL instructor for quite a while, and then I became an ESL teacher trainer.
Okay.
So transitioned to teaching teachers how to teach ESL.
Yes. Yeah. So, and have you taught some children or teens, preteens, people like that?
Yeah, early in my career, I started out working with children, and then once I started teaching adults, I just stayed teaching adults.
Yeah. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because I'm curious, what is the difference between teaching a kid and teaching an adult?
Oh, wow. Well, I'll give you the fun answer, and then I'll give you the scientific answer. The fun answer is
like the fun answer.
World of difference. Kids are just so happy to be there, and they're so happy to be with you. And well, not always, I guess I should say. Maybe in Korea. I never taught American kids, but Korean children were just so excited to see me every day. And they're coming from a place of curiosity, and they don't really, for the most part, have a lot of other things going on. This is their whole world. This is classroom. And so it's just a very different mindset, right? With kids. With adults, now you're getting into cognitive load, right? This is where motivation and anxiety really start to affect. Motivation and anxiety under the age of 7 don't have a huge impact on students, not in the same way that they do 7 and up. And anyone that's ever worked with teenagers can certainly tell you that's sort of when you're in the lowest point of motivation and anxiety. But it really all ties into cognitive load. There is a theory called the critical period hypothesis that there's a critical period until age 7, and before age 7, you can become a savant. You can learn 1,200 languages, and because your brain is some sort of a bottomless pit or a sponge of sorts. But then after 7, that starts to decrease, and there's actually no evidence to support that. But what there is evidence to support is that, after the age of 7, that's when our frontal lobe starts to develop. That's when our personality comes into play.
Right.
And that's where we start to care what people think about us. And we start to get self-conscious about our clothes.
Right.
Right. And all of those things are taking place in the working memory. And we talked before, the working memory is it's a limited capacity processor. It's also limited in time.
Sure.
And if it's filled with worrying about what people think about you, or worried about, as an adult, I forgot to pay my credit card bill, I got into a car accident on the way to class, my husband is mad at me, right?
Yeah,
and,
sure. That's right.
You're taking away space to learn new skills. Right. Essentially is all it is. It's not that we're smarter or better or brighter as children.
Yeah. And there's one big thing that children don't have and the adults have, and I can flip that, which it's a blessing and curse kind of thing, where the thing that the children don't have is actually a blessing which the adults have, which becomes a curse, which is, I already know that, right? It's coming to the learning with this idea that, okay, what are you going to teach me, right? I already know this, and a lot of these people are experts in their fields. They have certain ego that go with that, so that can become a barrier to letting in. We talked about being vulnerable when we're learning. So in your experience and in the way you see the world from your scientific background, is there a way to deal with that barrier with an adult? And especially when we're talking about VP, I personally, I'm like you, I don't take a project where the leadership is not involved. If they are not there, if they can't take their they can't get to a place where they are willing to sit in a classroom with the people who are also learning, I will not take the project. Because you have to, at least while you're in the learning environment, you need to be able to have the humility to take off that mask and be a learner. No matter how much you know. It's that the Zen philosophy of, emptying the cup, right? That's when we are the best learners. So any strategies that you have that can, at least momentarily, bring down those barriers to learning? Or even if you disagree with anything that I'm proposing, that's okay too.
No, I don't disagree. We as adults especially are very complex, right?
Yes,
but
that's true.
We're very complex, but one thing that our brains can agree on is those two things that I've kept mentioning, which are low anxiety, high motivation.
Yes.
So you want to find a way to trigger that. Yeah. And the other thing that can be incredibly powerful is making sure that your training environment and your training assets and your training goals, the entire package, are accessible to a wide range of folks. And what I mean when I say that is it obvious to me? Is there rationale? I guess that's a word I keep coming back to. So when I've had people ask me in the past, what is the difference between kids and adults? Adults need to understand why they're doing something. Right. Kids don't, not as much, right? So you have to come out of the gate with that. This training was created for this reason, to help you reach this goal and accomplish these 4 things, these various 4 specific things by the end of this class. That's very important with adults. They need to understand how they can apply this today and how this is going to either make them more money or help them get that promotion.
More market share. Right.
Make me a better partner, right? Sure. I need to know exactly what I'm doing and why. And I need to understand, again, from the beginning, how long is this going to take me? And what are some of the activities I'm going to be expected to do each time, right? Because adults, again, they want to know, is this something that I can do while I'm having dinner? Is this something I can do while I'm on the bus? Or is this something that I have to really set aside 2 to 3 hours of my day because
Yeah.
maybe the class itself is only 30 minutes, but the type of activities you're asking me to do are really complex and they require me to
Sure.
do some extra research. And so, right. So it's about managing expectations is really
Got
huge
it.
when it comes with adults.
Yeah.
And so all of those
Sure.
things that I've just mentioned are already decreasing anxiety because I know exactly what to expect.
Yeah.
And increasing motivation because I know exactly what I'm going to get at the end
Love
of
it.
this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the
Yeah.
other thing is, plain language in all of your content, even if
Yeah.
you are designing a course for Stanford University professors.
Yes.
Plain language,
Yeah.
everybody should be able to understand exactly. Because here's the thing, a lot of people who are designing training, especially subject matter experts, they love to taunt and flaunt how smart they are. And so they love to use these big giant words and talk about things that nobody knows what they're saying. But this isn't a reading comprehension course. You're not measuring my reading comprehension.
Yes.
You're measuring my ability to acquire these 6 skills. And if I can't understand the content that you've given me, or I don't have the background culture. Maybe I didn't grow up in this country. Maybe I don't know the pop references that you're mentioning, right?
Sure.
So you have to think about those things. Already my anxiety is high, my motivation is low because I don't know who Andy Warhol is, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And then the directions on the instructions of your content, they need to be clear and they need to be tested. Ask a colleague to review the instructions. Go through the way you've set up your course in your learning management system. Ask a colleague who doesn't know anything about it to run through it and say, did you get tripped up? Did everything make sense? Did you know exactly where you needed to submit your homework? Were the instructions clear? Right?
Yeah.
Because again, if I come into your LMS and I don't know what I'm supposed to do or where I'm supposed to go, my anxiety increases and my motivation decreases.
Yes. Yeah. And you that term that you use, accessibility, plays such a big role. It's not accessible in the sense that it's accessible for disabilities, but accessible to everyone, as in reading comprehension, for example.
Right.
Where if you're using big words, then it's not accessible to everyone. So
no,
if you use
especially not if English is not your first language. Absolutely not accessible.
Right. And it's also just easier to read because we go through our learning phases. And even if I'm a 40-year-old adult, it's easier for me to read a language that is written for 10-year-old. So it's just simpler. And then I'm more likely to engage with it and get it, right?
Exactly.
Because there's less mental, psychological processing, less anxiety, right?
Less cognitive load as well.
Less cognitive load. Oh, I know that. Okay, now I'm learning. I just made the connection. You were mentioning the cognitive load is now I just made the connection. The less cognitive load is the amount of processing that I have to do to comprehend or a topic or a subject or something like that, right?
Exactly.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And so good design, good instructional design, our goal is to decrease cognitive load so that you can acquire the intended knowledge and skills.
Got it.
Right?
Okay.
In its most simplest form. That's how I would say it.
Sure. Absolutely. Christie, you had a career path, and I'm assuming you've gone through a little bit of learning and change and transformation yourself, right? And of most of us who are passionate about what when we help others do this transformation thing, we've also gone through that ourselves a little bit, often, probably not always. But has there been a moment in your life when you thought that you kind of sort of wanted to give up? It's like, what's the point? The dark night of the soul kind of moment. Sometimes people say, well, I had multiple ones, or sometimes say, ask me again tomorrow, So, and I had different kinds of answers, but I would love to find out from you if you had a moment like that you had to deal with, and how did you deal with it?
Definitely multiple times. I would say previously it was really just directed towards finishing my doctorate. I passed my comprehensive exams. I think it was March 17th, 2020.
Yeah.
So you pass your comprehensive exams, and then the next step is that you apply for institutional review board approval to go collect your human subjects research data. And that's how you complete your dissertation and you graduate. So it's very exciting to finish your comprehensive exams, except 5 days later, the entire world shut down and the Institutional Review Board was no longer permitting anyone to conduct human subject research. So, and then also at the same time, at that time, there was a lot of instability in academia, and my dissertation chair left the university and went to another university. And so I was just like, what do I do now? And so that was probably the first time I persevered, because I'm, at that point I'd already invested a lot of time and money, but I'm sure you can tell just by talking to me, this isn't just a job. This is something I'm very passionate about.
Very passionate about it. Yeah, 100% comes through.
So I wanted to finish. But then I would say most recently it happened later. It happened late last year. It was around November, December. I was now 1 year graduated with my doctorate. I had been working for myself for a year. I also... I live in Asheville, North Carolina, so we were recovering from a massive storm. We had a Hurricane Helene that came through here, and many people in the region didn't even get water back on until December. It was a hard time, and I was struggling to continue to rationalize, because it's moments like that when you think to yourself, "Gosh, some paid time off would be great." But I don't have PTO because I work for myself, and I have to keep producing client deliverables or I don't get paid, and I have to keep marketing myself, and I have to keep showing up on LinkedIn even though I don't feel like it. And I thought to myself, at this point, I have my degree, I have tons of experience, just go work for somebody else. Just go get a job with a company that gives me healthcare and PTO and But I've done that in the past. And I remember the reason why I don't do it anymore is because I won't be satisfied working in an environment where everything that we've just talked about for the last hour is not valued, right?
Yes.
And the only way that I can ensure that it's valued is if I'm hired to come in and establish that value.
Sure. Yeah.
And so what I realized, what I needed, my main pain point at that moment in my life wasn't that I was doubting myself or my qualifications or my goals. It was that I had no business strategy. I was still saying yes to everyone. I wasn't thinking like an entrepreneur or even a business person.
Sure.
I was thinking like a freelancer, right? Someone who was just sort of still doing side gigs. And I had to change that mindset. So I'm an expert in my field, and I could talk about my field forever, but I sat down with a business coach the first time and she said, okay, let's get right to it. What are your yeses and your nos when it comes to your business? I couldn't answer her.
Yeah.
And that was a light bulb moment for me. And I realized, okay, I've spent my life becoming this expert in this field.
Yeah.
Now I need to learn about how to be an entrepreneur, and I need to learn how to run a business, and I need to grow and develop my business mindset.
Yeah.
And so that was a huge turning point for me. And if I hadn't done that, I probably wouldn't be having this conversation with you today. I probably would have just finally thrown in the towel because I was definitely at an impasse for sure.
Yeah. And here you are.
Yeah.
As we come through these kinds of experiences, go through an internal change. We find something about ourselves that we didn't know was there before, or we find out something about ourselves that, wasn't there before and is there now. So what's the difference between Christie, go as far as back you want to go, year down the year before, or 5 years, 10 years before, Christie the child, to Christie today, this moment? If you could point out one difference that you see in yourself, that you gained or you saw as you went through the trials and tribulations, if you can call it that, of the life and the career.
Yeah. So one word that comes to mind is anxiety. I would say that historically I've always been a very curious person. I've always wanted to learn and know. That's why I left the United States when I was 26 with $100 in my pocket and moved to South Korea, and then came back 10 years later.
That's interesting. So you were born in U.S. and then you went to Korea and spent some time there, and then you came back to the U.S.
Yeah, I was there for almost
Yeah.
10 years. And then
Interesting.
and then I lived in Turkey for a bit, spent some time in Israel, and then moved back to the United States. And so I've been here since 2019.
Okay. Awesome.
But yeah, so all of those things I've just described to you, my master's degree, even my bachelor's degree, which at that time everybody got a bachelor's, so it didn't really seem so irresponsible to make a knee-jerk decision to do that. My doctorate, I would say everything until recently, I have those decisions I have made from a place of survival, are very reactive, right? I just need to keep moving forward. I need to keep going. I need to keep going. I need to keep doing. And now I can say I'm not there yet, but I'm very much on the other side of that. And I'm on a pathway to being proactive. And, approaching things no longer from a place of anxiety, but from a place of love and trust. And, I'm not curious because I'm worried I'll miss out. I'm curious because I am genuinely want to be fulfilled with this knowledge because it's going to continue me on that healthy path, if that makes sense. I just had to, I had to make the decision. I've done a lot of therapy and I'm working with a great business coach, like I mentioned. And so it doesn't happen overnight, but it's the previous version of me wasn't sustainable. This version of me, I hope will be. It certainly is heading in that direction, I think.
Oh, I think it will be. It comes to the camera. I think it is already there. So that's great.
Thanks.
So I think you use the word anxiety. So the less anxiety, more love. And
absolutely.
that is a monumental shift. And, to have to go through in a very short period of time, that is a tremendous insight and tremendous progress in a human being. So
I think it was there for me. The reason it happened so quickly for me was because it was there, and it's always been there, but I had to feel that I deserved it, and that, it comes a lot from when we're children and how we grew up and how we see our parents, right? And how they make money and how they survived and provided for us. There's this concept that if you're not working 8-hour days and your back doesn't hurt and you're not stressed, then you're not working hard enough. And, you don't deserve to have a life if you're not doing that to get it, all that whole mindset. And so I had to really sort of unpack and unprogram what was modeled for me in my life and, reframe, like my life can look different. It can look however I want it to look.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that journey, because it's so important that we go through that. I think that I am a firm believer and advocate of, looking within, and I probably live from there. But you don't have to live like that. You at least have to find some time to kind of get in touch with who you are deep inside and just kind of let that guide you, right? The essence, what do we call it? The love, we called it. And so thank you. That's an inspiring story. So is there anything that, there's so much more to talk about. This is a big and complex topic, and we can be here for another 4 hours. Having said that, is there anything that you wish that you could share that you haven't had a chance to do so far?
I guess it would really be, because I've talked a lot about making big, huge changes in terms of building these learning and development programs, right? And these ecosystems and having all hands on deck. And that's not realistic for many people. And so something that I think is really important is, and this is something that I'm also developing as well, to start offering in for those folks who just want to solve one problem today. I'm working on developing tools, so frameworks that I use day to day, right? And so just to be able to go in and download those and, take a look at this tool by yourself, right? And be able to make small changes in your business or within your company
Yeah.
And I guess that would be, I'm pivoting there currently to think about how to help people who in that way. But I also would encourage people to just, like I said, stop and think, like, what is one change that I can make today?
Yeah.
And I think if you come from that mindset that I talked about, where,
Yeah.
if your employees thrive, your business thrives. We talk,
Yes.
we talk
100%.
a lot in
Yeah.
L&D about ROI, but what is the ROI of L&D? It's something that
Right.
comes up all the time.
Yeah.
And even without having exact metrics to talk about it, it's just, I think, shifting into that mindset of if my employees feel safe and they feel that they can, even ask questions in a
Right.
discussion board that I set up for them, right? Maybe it's just a Slack channel. Maybe it's one Slack channel where people can go and they can ask training questions, right? And there's somebody that's dedicated to answer those questions in that Slack channel. That's a small thing that you can do that just starts to build that culture and change that mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. On that note, how does someone get in touch with you if they want to bring you in or talk to you, or somebody's kind of thinking about, bringing about some changes in organization in terms of, maybe, not necessarily implementing training programs on a big scale, but they're thinking in that direction, right? So what's the best way to get hold of you?
The best way would be to go through my website, and from my website, you can fill out a form that I'll be able to. You can reach me there that way. I can reach back out to you. We can set something up.
Sure.
Or there's also another space on my website where you can what's the word? You can schedule. You can schedule a call with me, a 30-minute consultation where we can just talk. Because, like I said, those big learning solutions aren't for everyone. And I love meeting people where they are. And maybe through a 30-minute call, we can just talk about one small thing that you can start doing today. And that is satisfying to me because I'm helping you implement change. And so I love conversations, big and small about it.
Sure. Great. And we'll put all the information in the show notes. We'll also we'll try to do a section on, we'll use some of the learning and development insider jargon and things like that, some of the things. And I'm going to see if I can pull a section where we kind of explain what those terms are, so that we always try to, on our podcast, with this podcast, we do a show, it's like a blog post, which is a more detailed essay type of thing that we develop based on the conversation we had. And I'm going to put some information there so that if someone wants to get hold of you and explore the kind of thing that we talked about today, they can figure out what they are, those terms, and get more educated, and they can get in touch with you and set up that call with you for 30 minutes. So thank you so much, Christie. I enjoyed this conversation. I learned a lot. And I'll continue to learn as I added this conversation that we've had and do some things with the things I need to do to get this podcast episode out there. So from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate you being here and sharing your life journey and your expertise.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for giving me the space.
Okay, you're welcome. So I'm going to run the recording running for a little bit. And something I forgot to ask you in the beginning. So, by the way, how was this? You okay?
It was great. Yeah, it was very comfortable.
All right, good. So, one of the things I like to do, and I started doing this some time ago, is just kind of ask a couple of questions about what it's like to be interviewed on this podcast as a guest, right? So, is there anything that from the time that I think we found each other on Facebook, from the time to this moment, is there anything that could have improved, that we could have done better to have your experience to be on this podcast better?
I mean, on the one hand, I want to say maybe having questions in advance, but that, for my personality, that wouldn't have been good for me because I would have overanalyzed and overthought and tried to rehearse. And then it would have sounded that way.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't know if another person that would have been better, Yeah, but I guess from where I'm sitting, from my experience, no, honestly,
Okay.
I felt like meeting with you ahead of time was all I needed, really, because I got
Yeah.
a chance to understand sort of your pacing and the types of questions that you ask and get
Yeah.
comfortable on the
Sure.
screen. And yeah, for
Yeah.
me, no, not really.
Excellent. Yeah. And you've been on other podcasts? Or this is the one of the first ones? You've done
This is my
others?
second one. I did
Second
one
one.
last week and it was just audio only.
Okay.
So my first video podcast.
Yeah. So, and if you can tell me a little bit more about what it's like. So, the flow of the questions, the biggest portion of this, what makes or breaks a podcast, in my opinion, my judgment is the conversations, the kinds of questions that get asked and how comfortable you feel, motivation and anxiety, right? You
Anxiety,
talked about
right.
that. How was it for you? Did you feel comfortable and, less anxiety, more motivation as you sat there?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I feel the way that you asked your questions, I could tell that some you had decided to ask in advance and others you asked based on what came up. But
Right.
the way that you asked them and the sequence of the questions allowed me to make connections in my answers,
Right. Okay.
which I
Sure.
know
Yeah.
is those are the kind of podcasts that I like, right? It's like where things
Yeah.
come full circle.
Right.
And so I think that your style helped elicit that really well.
Okay. Awesome. Great. Thank you very much. That's a great feedback.